What's going on, guys? Meteorologist Jonathan Kagas back with you. It's 1 o'clock on a Friday, giving you another update in case you are unaware of what's coming this weekend. A pretty ugly weekend, especially Saturday into the first part of Sunday. We're going to give the latest timeline, some of the impacts coming down the pipeline in terms of the strong winds coming our way, very heavy rain, and there is a severe weather threat. That is a little more conditional in terms of the threat for damaging thunderstorms and the potential for a couple of tornadoes as well. I know that the T word, it's kind of a scary word, not going to lie, but we're going to break it down. We got to talk about it because that threat is going to be there. So we're going to break it all down for you. And we are going to start with the water vapor imagery because this is something that we've highlighted for the past couple of days, especially on clickorlando.com. And by the way, we are coming at you live on clickorlando.com, the Pinpoint Weather app, and of course, on News 6 Plus. So thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting the Pinpoint Weather team and News 6, of course, to give you weather. We know you have many options out there. Sound like a flight attendant. Here is our big swirl, right smack dab in the middle of the country right now. That is upper level low number 1. This thing right here, this little piece of energy, if you will, this shortwave trough, as we call it, is rolling out of British Columbia, getting ready to march its way into Utah, into the northern plains. And then we have our southern stream, what we call shortwave, right here, embedded in the subtropical jet stream. We've talked a lot about the subtropical jet this year. It's more active than it typically is because of El Nino. So what we've been seeing these past active weekends, really dating back to the middle of November when we had that really cloudy stretch, leading up to Thanksgiving and wet stretch, that was because of El Nino-induced pattern. Same last weekend, and now here we are again. So the long-range forecast that we gave you in September so far, unfortunately, has come into fruition. Here's the deal. These two guys up here are going to phase or come together and make one big dip in the jet stream. Then it's going to interact with our developing area of low pressure right about here, and then that low is going to strengthen considerably. Now, that is one of the reasons why that this is not going to get a name. It is not tropical in nature, and you're not going to see this highlighted by the National Hurricane Center because even though it may look like a tropical storm or hurricane from a satellite perspective, this is what we call an extratropical cyclone. It gets its strength, it gets its energy from differences in temperature and pressure in the atmosphere. It has fronts attached to it. Tropical systems do not have fronts with it. So it's going to be built meteorologically different than what kind of we're more used to seeing, a tropical storm or a hurricane. So impacts may look the same as a low-end tropical storm this weekend. Just know that it's not going to get a name. The Hurricane Center, they're doing their job. They just don't deal with extratropical systems like the one that's going to be rolling through this weekend. So here's some of the cloud cover. Again, our low is developing here. By tonight, it should look a little more like something like an area of low pressure, but it is developing up here. And again, once that dip in the jet stream, you can kind of see some of the clouds as a result of that gets to about here. It's going to feel that energy and then really start to strengthen and really start to get that heavy rain building with it as we move into tomorrow. So I want to show you what this is going to look like, potentially anyway, the future clouds and rain forecast. So tomorrow morning, we were talking about this just a little bit ago on Take 6, but I want to show you this one more time, and then we're going to get into some kind of high-level breakdown here of why the severe weather threat tonight, the potential damaging thunderstorms. The threat isn't zero. It's not all the way there, but it's not all the way not there, and I'll show you why in just 1 second. But I want to give you the other timeline again. 9 o'clock, not expecting there to be a severe weather threat at this point, although we are going to start to see the rainfall chances go up, especially south of Orlando. Typically, when you have warm air advancing like this, and we have a rain associated with a warm front, there's the fronts involved, they do arrive faster than modeled. So again, be prepared for rain to start to come onto the scene tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. So here we go as we get into the evening hours. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. This is when we're going to start to build a severe weather threat. What we have going on here, and I'm going to explain this in a little more detail, we have a warm front draped across central Florida right here. We are going to have a cold front right back here. Here's our area of low pressure developing. Where we get into the warm sector, and that is, I'm going to mark it right there with that W. That is being south of the warm front and then east of the cold front, kind of right in between the two fronts. That's where we're going to build a little more instability. And then right along the front here, we are going to have maximized wind shear. And you can see these darker reds popping up. That's what we're really going to have to watch late tomorrow night into Saturday. Saturday night, and then into early Sunday morning, you quickly though see how fast things start to wind back down in terms of the rain. The wind is going to stay cranked up. I'm going to show you that in just 1 second. So what we have going on here, we have a lot of dry air blasting in from the west. So the rain is going to be quick to shut off. So that's one thing that's going to change. That's one thing that's going to be different by Sunday morning. But this also could lead to another meteorological phenomenon, which could really crank up our winds on Sunday morning. More on that in a second. Here's our area of low pressure coming ashore right around Cedar Key. Again, this is not like a tropical storm or hurricane where like right around the center gets the strongest. It's a little bit differently built. So it's tied to those fronts and into the warm sector. That's where we get the severe weather threat. So it's different from a landfalling tropical system that, again, we'd be more accustomed to. Still a couple of showers around Saturday morning, but all the heavy stuff is done. But it could get really, really windy. Before we get into that, I do want to go over the rainfall amounts. Widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain coming down the pipeline. We could have isolated double than that, though, especially closer to the coast. And I would not be surprised if in some areas where we do get those training thunderstorms building off of each other closer to the coast, that we get even higher than that. So we are going to be watching for a flood threat really all through central Florida, but then especially closer to the coast where we have winds coming in off of the Atlantic, meeting winds out of the west. That's going to help to force up and really kind of wring out as much moisture as possible in a super high moisture environment. There's a ton of moisture, really, really high for this time of the year even. All right, so wind gusts. Starting this off on Friday, tonight, so it's going to be a little breezy. We've been dealing with the wind really all week. It's going to wind down, relatively speaking, today. It's still gusty, by all means. I know it's still gusty, but we're going to take just a slight break before we really ramp things up later in the day tomorrow. So this is 8, 9 o'clock for you on your Saturday. 35 to 45 mile per hour gusts are going to be common along the coast. More like 25 to 35 mile per hour gusts inland. You see that there? That's 9 o'clock on Saturday. And then look at this. They get even stronger across parts of central Florida by Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning. 35 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts. I would not be surprised if we even have isolated higher gusts. The rain is over at this time, so it's going to look a little bit better outside. But then we might get this short-lived, intense kind of rush of wind as this area of low pressure strengthens as it moves basically in this direction here. I know the banner's kind of covering up, but it kind of moves north of Marion County like that, and we have strong winds rushing in off of the back end. It's going to be a byproduct of, because we're going to see this low strengthen. Again, it can strengthen over land. It's not getting its strengthening source from the warm water like a tropical system. It is going to be the difference in temperature and pressure in the atmosphere, and there's going to be a lot of cold air coming in behind this as well. So that's what's fueling this storm. But as we have that big punch of dry air, this dry slot as we call it, we're still going to have moisture kind of falling into that dry layer of air. So this is going to be, could be a problem. If you have moisture falling into dry air, it becomes a little more dense. The air cools as moisture evaporates into dry air, and that drier air then falls to the surface. And that's what could be going on right here. We could have a very localized area of strong damaging winds late Sunday morning, even though we are drying things out and we may see some sunshine involved. So just be mindful of that. This is a very small scale feature that is very hard to pinpoint. It rarely happens, but in strengthening extratropical cyclones like this, especially when there's a very pronounced dry slot involved, we can get this happen. So the fanfare may be over. The severe threat will certainly be over. The heavy rain will also certainly be over, but we might end up seeing the most damaging part by the time we get into tomorrow. All right, speaking of tomorrow, here is the latest severe weather outlook, and if you've been paying attention, there has already been a change here, and we were actually just going to talk about that the severe weather threat is mainly going to be south of Orlando. The earlier run had, the earlier outlook from the Storm Prediction Center was right about here for that slight risk. Let me use my yellow arrow or my yellow line. That's where the earlier outlook is. Now we have that kind of shifted south of Orlando, Melbourne, Kissimmee, into Polk County, over Tampa, south of the I-4 corridor for the most part. And I'll show you why that is in just 1 second. And notice you have, again, if you're paying close attention to this morning, the outlook has been expanded further to the south. One of the things that have been uncertain, and we talked about this yesterday if you were with us, that I was leaning towards the European model and being correct. I know everybody has their kind of deal where, okay, I like this model, I like this model. Different scenarios, models do better. The GFS yesterday was putting this area of low pressure kind of right here. The Euro was putting it here, and a lot of other models are putting it right here too. Why is that important? Again, with an extratropical system like what we have going on tomorrow and into Sunday, we have fronts. So if it was going to be to the northwest like this, we'd have the warm front kind of draped right through here. We'd have the cold front right back through here. That would have put a lot of the Florida Peninsula, including most of Central Florida, in what we call that warm sector. Tomorrow, as I go on a small tangent, there's not going to be a lot of instability. Severe weather needs a bunch of ingredients to come together, just like making a cake. And we have a ton of wind energy. We have a ton of wind shear in our atmosphere. That if we do get storms to develop tomorrow night, individual storms embedded in that heavier shield of rain that's going to be sliding through, they're going to have the opportunity to rotate and produce tornadoes. That is the one thing we have prolific amounts of. What we are lacking, though, is instability, the fuel to get storms going. So the thunderstorms embedded are going to be hard to come by, but if they punch through, they're going to have the opportunity to produce tornadoes. So that is why it's conditional. If we get those storms to develop, they'll have the potential to do that. So that's why we are on guard. They would have had a higher opportunity to do that if this scenario played out. I don't think that scenario is going to play out, but I wanted to show you because that's what some of the models were showing yesterday. I think it's going to be more like this, so that a little bit, not as much of Central Florida is going to be into that higher instability area into that warm sector, and that is why we have now most of South Florida highlighted, from Fort Myers to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, the Keys, Lake Okeechobee area, and then Kissimmee, St. Cloud, Mico, Melbourne. We're really going to be watching that for you. And for that, I want to show you this. This is something what's going to be storm relative helicity. It's a very, very big meteorological term. Just know it as kind of forecast rotation tracks. And it can these high-resolution models can kind of hint at where they think that there could be rotating thunderstorms. So here is Saturday at 11 o'clock. We talked about that main severe weather threat going to be at 11 o'clock on Saturday. Late Saturday, I should say. This is 11 o'clock. Here's Lake Okeechobee, and notice we have these two white lines pop up. So the model is hinting at, okay, we could have some of these higher helicity areas. Also note what happens early Sunday morning, and this is a little too close to comfort. Again, this is just guidance, not gospel. So it just gives us, again, okay, to be on alert to, we have a couple of more popping up here, and this is getting a little bit too close to us. I'm not saying we're going to have a rotating storm in and around Mico tomorrow, but the further south of Orlando you are, the higher your severe weather threat is going to be. And you see that darker blue there. So the computer model wants to also kind of spit out a little more intense helicity or intense rotation there. And that is all going to be because we have our area of low pressure at this point kind of twisting through here. Our warm front is going to be bending back here. We're going to have our cold front coming through here. At the surface, our winds are going to be like this. And then aloft, we have that upper low blasting southwest winds. That's the turning of the wind with height. I mean, if we were able to generate instability, this would be a crazy severe weather outbreak. So thankfully, we at least are more conditional. So we can be thankful for that. But at the same time, again, we are going to be watching for the potential for a couple of tornadoes to develop, especially south of Orlando and then really towards Lake Okeechobee. Alrighty, guys, we are going to be back here at 4 o'clock on clickorlando.com. You'll get another push alert at about that time where we're going to have another breakdown. We're going to have a new run of models come through, so we're going to see how they're behaving. I really, really think, though, that the scenario is coming in line with what I just showed you at this point. It's looked for a couple days that it was going to come through Cedar Key and that the outliers of that low going through the Panhandle were going to be outliers, and those have since trended back to that low coming towards the Big Bend. Again, it's different than a tropical system, so we're not looking at the worst of the weather happening right here. We're looking at the worst of the weather being outside and around it. That's what happens with these extratropical kind of nor'easters. big storms that typically in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast and have Northeast winds. They're not called nor'easters because they happen in the Northeast. It's because of the Northeast wind. So it's that same kind of deal, that extra tropical feel. But again, the worst weather is not tightly packed around the center like you would with a tropical storm. So I wanted to be also clear about that. You say, oh, the lows go in there, we're good. Not in one of these. So that's what we're watching closely. Alrighty, guys. I do this all the time. I say bye, and then I keep on talking. That's what happens with me. Anyway, we'll be back at 4 o'clock. Download the Pinpoint Weather app. If you're not watching on the Pinpoint Weather app, it's a free download. Not only are you going to get updates from us all weekend long, updates if there are watches and warnings from the National Weather Service in play. It's obviously a busy weekend leading up to Christmas. A lot of people may not be paying attention, so make sure your friends know. Tell them to download the Pinpoint Weather app. And anytime that we go live, you're going to get it right in the palm of your hand. Anytime there's an update on the storm, we're going to let you know from real meteorologists like us here at the News 6 Weather Team, Pinpoint Weather Team. All day tomorrow, all day Sunday, where it could get a little nasty. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will catch you at 4 o'clock.